There we go! This time with music. Welcome to the art critique. I'm going to finally go through the 9 classes. Last time we did Sniper, and we did the art critique for everyone else of the cast. Thus, except the spy. Oops, let me get the more default build. So, for the spy, spy is an interesting scenario, right? Because we kind of fall in the situation that we had before with the Angie of should we do the art critique of the Angie holding a shotgun or a melee weapon, the medic with the first weapon or the med gun. For the spy, unlike for the medic and the engineer, the picture of it shows a pistol, but at the same time, he's most recognizable for the knife. So that's kind of a conundrum, right? But because then we have like player perception and supposedly some sort of clue for design. But there is a little detail that I'm gonna use to tie break this, which is when you get into the game as a class, you don't always start with your primary. That's the case for most classes. But for the medic, you start with your secondary, for example, and for the spy, you do get into a match with the knife. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but so we have like it's a bit conflicting as far as design clues would go, possibly if you want to communicate what's most iconic for a character, maybe. But because here is the pistol more iconic, or is the knife? Here we have a pistol, but when you log in, you begin with the knife. So I'm gonna choose the knife. That's the gist of it. And also the player perception. I think the backstab is way more iconic for the spy. So anyway, with all that said, art critique. Disclaimers as usual. For this art critique. This is the art critique of an art inside of a game, so I kind of need to talk a little bit about game design, but this is not like a in-depth game design discussion, so be mindful of that. Some of it is there, obviously, but I'm not gonna go in depth into the mechanics and stuff. And also the other thing that I always want to keep clear is that I'm following Feldman's method for our art critiques, which is about 4 steps in order: description, analysis, interpretation, and judgment. In the description, I'm going to describe what I see. On the analysis, I'm going to talk about the elements of art for the artwork here. On the interpretation, I'm going to interpret the creative vision of the author. In this case, it's called interpretation, and I'm gonna interpret, but technically, if I knew the author, I could just ask them their creative vision, you know. But if I don't have access to the author's thoughts, I can just interpret. That's why we can always do art critiques even after the original creator is deceased or something. Anyway. And finally, that's the interpretation. I'm going to interpret the creative vision, and on the judgment step, I'm going to call this successful or unsuccessful art for the vision. Basically, by the way I'm going to do that is going through the principles of art, and look at the principles. I'm going to make the call of whether the art kind of accomplish what the creative vision wanted for it. Let's say that's why it's called successful or unsuccessful. You know. Not good or bad, or right or wrong, that's all subjective, matter of preference, and stuff. Even though you could say that the technique of the artist is good, is skilled, but still, anyway. But the art itself, what I'm going to call here, is successful or unsuccessful in the end. And with all that said, finally, let's begin! Description. What do I see? Okay, so we have this dude with a mask and a suit and tie. the name of this mask is very specific, right? I'm gonna see if I can find it real quick, because vocabulary is always nice. I learned about the slouch hat of the sniper last time I did something like this. And also it's gonna be easy for me this time because I know the name of this mask in Portuguese. So, I'm Brazilian, by the way. So I just need to translate it. Come on, Google. I'm on the last step. Don't fail me now. Okay. Everything was frozen. In Portuguese it would be balaclava. Balaclava, for those who are curious. And what's... oh, come on. No connection. What's that supposed to mean? This is hoodinking, because I can see I am live right now on the stream. Jesus, am I going to have to use my cell phone just for this? What a nuisance! Taking time away from the critique. Internet. Balaclava. Okay. Is it the same? Am I making a fool out of myself here? Is it the same in Portuguese and English? I don't know. Whatever, it's a mask. Okay, a little trivia for you guys. In English, in Portuguese, this mask has a specific name. It's called balaclava. Feel free to tell me if you know something similar in English. Whatever. Anyway, so yeah. So the man with the suit and tie, a mask. Is that a cigarette? Yeah, he's smoking a cigar, holding a pocket knife, I guess. Wearing gloves. The suit is red. The suit and tie are red. Shoes. What else? Yeah, a pretty concealed man, right? Has gloves, mask. The suit covers the whole body, naturally. And all of that. Anything else that I would add for the description here? I don't know. You can see the suit has a little vertical pattern, I guess. So that's it for the description. Let's move on to the analysis now. So let's talk about the elements of art. I'm gonna consider, usually you're gonna see 7 elements of art: lines, shapes, forms, text, space, texture, color and value. That's the common one. Some authors also add points as an 8th element, and I'm gonna do that. I agree with those authors, makes sense to me from my humble studies on the matter. So I'm gonna talk about 8 elements of art here. So let's begin with points, might as well, since that's what differs from the norm in my case. So for points, I don't think I see any. In this artwork, there are some stuff that I'm looking here, but they will pretty sure they relate to value. I'm gonna talk about that later. So yeah, I think I don't see any points here on the 3D model of the spy. So okay, let's move on to lines then. Lines, you gotta be careful, because not just because there is a separation between 2 areas of a picture doesn't mean there's a line there. I think that's a somewhat easy concept to understand. If there is like 2 colors, it's enough for you to discern 2 areas. There doesn't need to be a line. For example, here I don't think there is a line between the 2 parts of the suit, of the pants and the upper part. And many of these parts here, I think they look like lines, but I don't think there are any. I think it's just shadows from inside the suit. That's what I'm going to be considering here anyway. Oh, I guess there are the lines of the pattern of the suit, right? That's probably the best that we're gonna find here. Not sure there would be anything else. The mask, there's nothing on the cigar. It's a bit too small for me to see properly, but anyway. The mouth, it's probably forms, I believe, maybe texture. I'm gonna get to that. So yeah, so I only see lines on the suit then, and the lines thus are mostly straight, right? They're not perfectly straight, I believe, but they're mostly straight. They are also somewhat thin. I don't see them as being very thick. And finally, they are in, well, they're in red, right? Yeah, they're in a light red in contrast with darker red of the suit. So yeah, I guess that's it for lines. Let's move on to shapes. Shapes are something. When it comes to the elements of art, shapes and forms are different. Shapes are always two-dimensional. Forms are always three-dimensional. So that's kind of the idea. So, for example, the silhouette of a character is a shape. You might know that if you have seen anything about Team Fortress 2 design. For example, here we see these, humanoid shapes with a torso, 4 limbs, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. So those are shapes. And even for a humanoid, there is a number of edges in the shapes here. Also, by the way, depending on since this is a 3D object, depending on the angle, you're gonna have different shapes. It's fine. I'm gonna try to look at the most noticeable ones to me, because if I do slight differences here, I think the humanoid, in many of these angles, the humanoid shapes are still there, and the edged parts here, edgy parts, let's say, and they listen to I don't know, rock and roll and stuff, and go to parties and drink alcohol. So edgy. Please ignore me. On that part. What else? For the shapes. Look at the shoes, not much to say there. Bit pointy shapes, I guess, at the tip. I guess the torso specifically is somewhat rectangular, not a perfect rectangular by any means, but has some semblances to it. What else? Some triangular-like shapes here for the part of the suit and the tie. The tie may be less, but like these things here. What else? The head is completely covered with the mask, so you don't see any hair, so more of a rounder shape for the head. And what else? And finally, also a thin shape for the knife. On many angles of it. Like for example, this angle is a bit weird one, but yeah. But on many angles, a thin shape for the knife, pointy one on the pointy tip. And what else? I think that's mostly it for shapes. Humanoid, rounder head, is quite rectangular-ish on the torso, many edges, and a knife with a thin shape. I guess I could also mention the fingers, but whatever, I already mentioned humanoid shapes, so maybe that we can just leave it as is. Let's talk about forms now. Forms, as I said, are always 3D. It's about depth and three-dimensionality and how the object occupies the space around it on the 3 dimensions. So for the forms of the spy, it's not surprising that sometimes you see similarities between the shapes and the forms. In here, much like there were many edged shapes, there are edges on the forms. Although I think there is a better term for it when it comes to dimensionality. Or is there? Not sure. Arista? No, probably not. Yeah. Again, in Portuguese, there is a word that's perfect for this, which is aresta, which is something 3D. Actually, not sure. Maybe that also goes for 2D. Whatever. Anyway, Also some edges on the farms here. Although we see on this lower part of the suit some flatness to it, as we can expect from a suit in real life, you know. And we see some flatness to it there. What else? We had the rectangular-like shapes for the torso. Now we have somewhat blocky-like. I really push it, but okay, whatever. It's one way to describe it, I guess. I'm just gonna call it a torso. Actually, I might as well mention that, right? Also humanoid forms with the torso, arms, legs, and the head. Very thin legs, I'd say, on the farms there. Didn't mention that for the shapes, but I'm gonna mention it now for the farms. Very thin legs, thin arms. I'm not sure I would call the arms thin actually, but the legs definitely for the farms. The arms to me it's not that thin, not that thick, I don't know. What else? And on the head we see some interesting forms because of the ears and the whole features of the face, right? So that we have that protuberance, double protuberance for the ears, some slight changes, you know, details on the face to communicate the forms of the face, the mouth, the eyes. I guess I might as well add the very thin cigarette, I guess. What else for forms? On the suit there is a little bit of three-dimensionality conveyed, like on the little hole here, with the help of shadow, some very slight shadows as I see it. Very slight one. Anything else for the forms? Again, I gotta mention the fingers, but anyway. Humanoid forms, I already said that. The blade has flatness to it, as expected. And the edge, as expected. When I say as expected, as if you think of a blade in real life, right? For example, not all art needs to be realistic, but in this case, I think that's it for the forms in general. Humanoid forms, flatness, there's the torso, thin legs. I don't see much to talk about for the shoes, and details and protuberances for the ears, details for the face. Yeah, okay. I guess that's good enough for the forms. Let's talk about now space. Space is stuff like, as the name suggests, this little area on the armpit of the spy, you know, and how the author used that. So for the use of space, I guess naturally the area between the legs of the spy is the most generous use of space here. There is, as I just mentioned, there is some on the armpits, under the armpits. What else? Some very slight one between the knife and the torso of the spy, very almost imperceptible. Also some tightish space in this part between the edge of the suit and the pants. What else? That's mostly it. If you wanna push it there, you could say there's some between the edge of the shoe and the leg, because it's bent, the leg is bent. So we could also mention that. What else? Anything else for the space? I don't know. I could mention other smaller examples, but I think the most noticeable ones are the space between the legs and below the armpits for the spy here. So that's it for this of space. What about texture? Texture is the element of art which is all about the surfaces and the appearances of them. So the pattern of the suit, for example, it's not. I don't think it's exactly a texture, maybe, but I don't know. In this case, I have considered it to be referring more to the element of lines, right? But we could also talk it as a texture. It would be a pattern texture if we would look at it in that way. But aside from that, since I already consider it for lines, I guess. Not sure if there is anything. Okay, mixing up elements. It's very common to mix up principles of art, but for different elements of art to be mixed up, I don't know. Sometimes some elements are kind of easy to be confused between themselves, or for you to see one thing as two different elements. But I try to avoid that, so that's the logic here for my choice. Oh, anyway, all that said, for textures, if we're not considering the pattern, would-be pattern textures of the suit, I don't think there is much in general, right? We see a lot of light being reflected, but as far as okay, there is some very tight, very small folds on the arms of the suit. Yeah, okay, so that's an example of textures. Some very subtle folds here. Let's see if I can find another example. Just hide the folds on the suit. And this is like a good way to understand textures, right? If the folds are textures, compare that to the lines and stuff, so on and so forth. Since I mentioned mixing up elements of art, sometimes you can mix up forms and textures. Maybe if you're like me, I try to consider textures when something just a surface and forms something different. If it's a protuberance, then it's a form to me. That's how I think about it. But anyway, outside the folds on the suit, for texture, not sure if I should consider something like that for the mask as well, on the parts where there's the ears of the spy. And I think, I'm not sure, because it's a bit harder to see, but maybe the spy has some aftershave. That's an example of texture. It would be some of a abrasive texture, let's say. Anything else? I think that's it. Although I think the most noticeable texture is by far the folds on the suit and the arms. And I guess there's some other also on the torso, on the legs near the crotch, here also on the other extent of the leg. Also here, yeah, folds on the suit are by far the most noticeable textures to me. There's so many, I don't know why I just noticed the arms first, but whatever. After that, there's only 2 elements of art missing. By the way, you don't need to go through them in any order. I just necessarily. I have done this many times, so I kind of have my own order to help me remember, but you do you, if you ever want to do art critique yourself. Now let's talk about the element of color. So, for the element of color, Team Fortress 2 color, yes, calm down, we're gonna get there, especially on the Judgement stuff. But yeah, red, we see the suit is on a shade of red, a brownish shade of red, I would say, perhaps, or something like that. The tie is red, the mask is in a darker red, so there are many different shades of red. What else? A little bit of white because of the suit, also black for the gloves and the boots, and also a different shade of white for the face, I think. I don't know if it would be porcelain white specifically, I don't know. And the cigarette, there is also the cigarette, I think it's white, but it's so small that it's kind of hard for me to make out the details. Yeah. And maybe the aftershave has some very small... it has a little grey in it, let's say. But naturally the shades of red is the most defining color here. And after that, as I said, shades of white and black. One shade of black, I guess. By the way, did you know that technically in color theory, a shade of black is always black? In your day-to-day, there are shades of black. You know, it's like slightly colors very similar to black and stuff, or shades of any color. But on color theory, shades mean something different. Just a little curiosity for you. Look it up if you're curious. But anyway, that's it for color. Red, a lot of red, and then white and black. And finally, let's talk about value, which is all about light and darkness, shadiness and brightness. It has its name because one way to achieve that is adding white and black to the color, which would be the value of the color as they call it, I think in color theory. But in our case, we don't need to focus just on color theory. I think we ought to not do that because it's easier to talk about shades of black, for example, and have people understanding outside of the context of color theory. But anyway, value, lights and shadows and stuff. So we can already see some on the torso and on the armpits and between the legs. So those are noticeable ones. A little bit here, yeah, on that part right side behind also. And other than that, you can also see some bright parts on the shoulders of the spy, on the head. Naturally, this is the part where game design matters, because we are looking at the spy here on the loadout, and we can wiggle around the spy to change how the light's reflecting on him and stuff. On game, the value would be possibly different on different parts, but I think it's a good enough example here, let's say. And indeed, it was chosen by Valve to be a model, a picture of the spy here, right, on the loadout. Another option would be on the choose character screen, but I chose this one here on the loadout instead. But anyway, with all that said, yeah, so brightness on the shoulders, on the head, there is some here on this angle. If you change the angle, okay, it's still there. Some very intense brightness because it gets to the point of looking white. What else? And yeah, unlike the shadows, which for example here, I still kind of can make out the patterns of the suit, even through the shadows. That's a common thing that I do, and I want to try to see how intense the shadow is, or the light is, how well you can make out details through it. So through this analysis, I'm gonna say that to me, so there's intense brightness, as I said, on shoulders, head, on the on the right arm of the spy. Some more mild brightness on most of the spy's body, and mild shadows, not that dark shadows, and it's not pitch black. On the armpits, under the legs, stuff like that, a bit on the torso, and mild ones, because you can still make out details. I often see mild shadows on Team Fortress 2. I have a guess that their game design philosophy is behind that, the idea of clarity, making things easier to see, but just a guess. What I can say for certain is that that's my analysis here right now. The intensity of the brightness and the shadows and where they're placed. Okay, so that's it for the elements of art, for the analysis. Let's move on to the interpretation. So, for the creative vision here, let's start with the easy one, right? Because this is a character inside of a game. This is the spy from Team Fortress 2, so it would be responsible of us if we didn't consider something like the creation of the spy class, spy character for Team Fortress 2. That's gonna be a part of the creative vision here that I'm interpreting, So they wanted that. They wanted this to be the spy character class for Team Fortress 2. Okay. What else am I gonna interpret for the creative vision here? And also, the context, other aspects of the game's design also factoring, right? Considering, for example, the mechanics, I'm gonna go a bit more in depth and say that I interpret that they wanted this character to be tied to stealth and concealment, which is all about the mechanics, but also stuff like the mask, the gloves, the boots, and the how concealed, as I said on the description, how concealed the character's body is. So I think that was also important for the creative vision. Unlike, say, Heavy, which has his strong bare arms exposed so everybody can see. For the spy, we don't see much of that. Grab the knife spy, thank you. And so I interpret that was no coincidence. I interpret that was part of the creative vision here. So for now we have the idea of making the spy character class 1442 and to make a character which is concealed, which has a concealed appearance. Let's phrase it like that. Has a concealed appearance. Does not show much skin and stuff. It's covered. Anything else? I'll interpret for the creative vision. I think I also was important for them the idea of some sort of gentleman, some character which is civilized, and this time factoring what we know for the spy's personality. You know, he's always polite and saying gentleman, stuff like that, and the choice of a suit and tie, I think, touched to that, so I think that was also part of the creative vision for the art here. What else? I mentioned concealment, the ideas of some sort of gentleman or some sort of civilized individual, for that idea to be conveyed. That's the notion, right? Because visually, in one way or another. What else for the creative vision? Those are 3 good points I would already reckon, let's say. But is there anything else? I don't know. I'm thinking about the cigarette, if there is anything I would mention when it comes to that specifically, because I don't think, because I don't see that tying that well to the other aspects of it, the other ideas that I said. So let me see, I don't know. Anything else I find important for the creative vision? Because there are minor things we could talk about, right? Maybe they really wanted the character to have a mask. I kind of broad stroked it when I said a covered appearance, right? A hidden, closed appearance, covered. Anyway, so I don't know. Character class, concealed one, some sort of gentleman. Yeah, I think that's mostly it. Okay, I think I have a fourth idea. Let's stop at that, because this one is kind of pushing it maybe, but I think it's still valid. So who knows what's gonna come after that. But when it comes to the cigarette, I mentioned that. I believe part of the creative vision for them was to give the spy some personality, you know, because cigarettes are not, I think, necessarily tied to espionage, I guess, the spy class, or to a gentleman or civilized individual. I probably shouldn't use that word, whatever. And also, it doesn't also have anything to do with a covered appearance, right? As I interpreted, I think the idea for the cigarette was that this character had some personality, you know, that's a habit of his, that's something he enjoys doing. And yeah, I guess I would say that. And also, so that should be good enough for the interpretation. I'm just thinking if there's anything that I can talk about the knife. No, I'm gonna leave it at that, because the knife is tied intrinsically to the mechanics of the spy class, right? So, of backstabbing. So I'm gonna say that they wanted to create the spy class and they wanted the class to backstab. Naturally, I don't know how that process went, but that's what I'm going to be interpreting here. That's why this is an interpretation. I don't really know, but my interpretation here. So to recap, the 4 ideas that I'm going to be considering important for the creative vision. To make the spy class 1442, to make a character with a covered appearance, hidden, concealed appearance, to make a character which conveys ideas of a gentleman or some civilized folk, let's say, who lives in the city, if you really want to go to the root of the word. And finally, for it to have a personality of his own, right? So those are going to be the 4 ideas that I'm going to be considering. And now on the next step, on the evaluation or judgment, both name works, either name works, I'm going to basically take those ideas and see how well they were achieved, you know? And that's where the principles of art are gonna factor in. I'm gonna talk a little bit about them. So yeah, so let's move on now to the judgment step and see if this is a successful work of art or not for that creative vision. Different critics, different visions, different judgments, if you ever find another one. So for the principles of art, I'm gonna be considering 6 here because I don't see much consensus, at least online, on what are the principles, although there are many stuff that repeats itself. So in my attempt to factor most of the authors, if not all of them, I'm gonna be considering here, what was the first one? Movement, unity, contrast, emphasis, balance, and proportion. Those 6. And to be fair, many times, many of different principles that other authors consider, I'm kind of gonna add into one of the 6 ones. For example, some authors believe in, what was it? Pattern, rhythm as a separate principles. I'm gonna consider them in unity. Others believe that, what else? Hierarchy is another principle of art. I'm going to consider that in emphasis, and so on and so forth. My only problem is with the authors that consider some of the elements of art to be principles themselves. So then kind of that's a problem for me. I have not found a way to harmonize all of that, but whatever. Maybe on their context, to be fair, maybe on their context it makes sense, the context they were talking about, but for my art critique here, movement, unity, contrast, emphasis, balance, and proportion. So let's begin with movement. And warning, be careful, watch out, stop! It has nothing to do with animations, principle of movements. It's all about how a work of art, static or not static, how it can move your eyes around the artwork. The example I always use is the manga Dragon Ball Z from Akira Toriyama, which naturally, the panels naturally moved your eyes to the next panel, that panel to the next panel, that panel to the next panel. So Akira Toriyama was very skillful at the principle of movement, let's say. And so for the principle of movement here, probably the most strong, probably where I see it most strongly is through the lines and patterns of the pattern of the suit of the spy, which I think move my eyes through the extent of the suit, from up to down, specifically in my case. What else? I guess there is also a little bit of it slightly on the way the arms of the spy are bent. To me, it is a bit like an arrow, right? So it kinda moves my eyes, in this case to the left, for example, in this case to the right. But I see the pattern on the suit as a stronger way that movement is being conveyed here. That the principle of movement is being showcased here, let's say. For example, the tie is another example of it, I guess. It's a kind of a long one in the shape of it. So yeah, so that's where I see the principle of movement here. So let's talk about the creative vision now. Does any of that tie to the spy class character for Team Fortress 2? The pattern on the suit and stuff? The shapes and forms of the arms? Not much, really. Although there is one idea that I have talked about previously on the other art critiques, which is the fact that all of the Team Fortress 2 characters are guys. This is not Overwatch where we have like a hamster and robots and stuff. Everybody is a human person. Or maybe Pyro is not, we don't know. But they're all humanoids at the very least, and Pyro is probably a human, I guess. Anyway, and so if that is an important part of the game design philosophy for Team Fortress 2, if we ever have Team Fortress 3, and all classes, let's say we add new classes, if the new classes are all humans again, you know, that's like a principle of design and stuff. That's like a pattern here, something that's part of the game design of Team Fortress 2. And why am I saying all of that? Because the somewhat principle of movement on the arms of the spy would thus be kinda conveying a little bit the human morphology, you know, the arms, humanoid morphology and stuff. So I don't know how strong that argument is, that all characters be humans, an important part of the game design. Maybe it is. So I don't know. For this art critique, I guess I'll be considering it, since that's what I did for previous critiques, actually. But I totally respect a critic that would believe otherwise, that would say otherwise. So yeah, as I see it, helping a little bit to convey that it's a guy and a person, and so Team Fortress 2 cares about that in the game design. Okay, so because remember I said on the creative vision, the idea was to make the spy class for Team Fortress 2. I didn't talk about spy whatsoever in all this, in everything that I said right now, right? But it's important that it's for Team Fortress 2, because there are other spies in other games and stuff, right? So, you know. But we have at least an argument to believe they were taking care about that, with that. So anyway, what about the other ideas of the creative vision? What about the idea of a concealed character and with a covered appearance and stuff? Doesn't show much, doesn't tell much. So naturally, I think the principle of movement here helps a lot, because the suit covers most of the spy's body. You know, again, unlike, for example, Heavy or Scout, where we see their bare arms, for example, and so on and so forth. So the principle. Oops, grab your knives. Fine, thank you. So the principle of movement here, I think it's tied to that, to how the suit covers most of the spy's body. And so all of that to say, what's the logic here? Basically, the idea is that this was intentional, if you want to simplify it. The idea is that they did something that was all about what they wanted to achieve, you know. That's why we use the principles of art to say if this was a successful or not, because the idea is that if the principle is tied to the creative vision somewhere or another, then it was intentional, and thus they achieved what they wanted. That's why you can also use the principles of art to argue whether a work of art is finished or not. Because if it's not finished, the author didn't do anything, so there's no intentionality in nothingness, let's say. But whatever, let's move on. Yeah, so principle of movement helping with this idea of conveying a covered hidden character here. Intentionally done. What about the idea of some sort of... this one is going to be easy, right? Of some sort of gentleman or individual from modern society, let's say. Modern urban society. It's the suit. So these patterns are naturally part of the suit's design, and I think it's pretty common for suits. There are many with this sort of pattern. Even if the color is a bit unique, right? Because it's red. But I think most suits are on darker colors, or at least there is somewhat of a, I don't know, expectation that suits are gonna be darker colors. I don't know, whatever. At least by me, admittedly. And finally, so yeah, okay. So the principle of movement is helping with that. And finally, what about the idea of a character with personality, some personality of his own? So okay, I was thinking about the cigarette when I came up with this part of the interpretation, right? When I interpreted that. But naturally, the choice of a suit also conveys some personality. If that's the clothes the spy chose to wear, you know. Although, okay, that actually is debatable. I was trying to remember the word. That's actually debatable, because what if he's just using the suit to work, you know? Is it really the most expressive attire, let's say, that conveys personality and stuff? So I don't know, depends on a lot of stuff, right? In this case, I will argue that it is. It does help convey the spy's personality because of the context. Specifically, what's the context? Basically the game, right? Just give me a second, because maybe I'm getting a bit ahead of myself here. Because I was going to say that when you fight and everybody's using like bulletproof vests and the spy is using the suit, but I think maybe I'm getting a bit too much into game design here. Sorry. Let's try to focus just on the spy and on this model here. Yeah, I think the logic is somewhat solid that I just laid about, but let's try just to focus on the character model here. I don't know. Here's the tip: if you ever want to try to do art critique for art inside of games, this kind of stuff is gonna happen often. It's gonna be hard to say where the game design begins and where the art ends and the game design begins, and vice versa, the different disciplines and stuff, right? It's kind of a mess, but that's fine. I do it because I guess I like this mess. So, but okay, what matters here is that we make a decision, so of how we should look at this, right? So that I can make the judgment, the call later. And so, as far as conveying personality and stuff, if we're gonna consider what I said before, like looking at the spy in the game, then we would have an argument already, right? But in this case, just if we try to isolate it, you shouldn't. We shouldn't. That's why on the interpretation I consider all the stuff that I said. But if we try, just for the sake of argument, I think it's still has some logic to it to say that the suit conveys personality, because if you don't take the context into consideration, then it could be any context. And so if the dude is, it's like that character from How I Met Your Mother. I forgot because I didn't watch that show. You know that everybody that always wears the suit because that's his personality. You know, on that context, that I believe humbly that conveys personality. And in here, without so on a vacuum, let's say, I think a suit can convey personality, and which is an even stronger. There's an even stronger argument to that if you just think about again, a spy in this war zone thing with everybody using bulletproof vests and the spy is using a suit and tie. So yeah. So as far as the principle of movement goes, all parts of the vision are accounted for, right? And I'm gonna be honest, that already is enough to give me a conclusion for whether to call this successful or not. But we're gonna go through the other principles as well, because, you know, let's do this properly. And not always a single principle manages to capture everything for the creative vision. In this case, it happened with movement. It's funny because there is the next principle that I'm gonna talk about. Unity is usually one that is very easy to capture the creative vision of the author. Let's talk about unity. Unity is all about different parts of the artwork, like apparently working together. And we must also consider variety, which is the opposite of unity, on the same discussion here, on the same evaluation, let's say. So let me see here, where do I find unity and or variety? So probably the strongest unity is on the red, right? Because there is repetition. Repetition is one way that you can achieve unity. Repetition, patterns, rhythms, proximity, all that stuff, continuity, ways that you can achieve unity. And in this case, there is repetition in the red. There are different shades, but they are all red, so there is unity in that. And think about game design, it would be blue if it was on the other team, but anyway, I think still the same logic applies. There's also continuity on the color of red through the whole suit, so that's probably, as I see it, the strongest source of unity. What else? I could also say repetition of the edges on the arms and the knees that are kind of bent, and the repetition of many edges throughout the forms and shapes, I guess, of the spy here. That's another example of unity. What else? For variety, I don't see much, but I guess there's some on the cigar and the knife. Those are like different elements through their forms, shapes, I guess color, because they are... The color, not that much, right? The knife is what? Gray and black, maybe. We already have black on the gloves and the boots, and even the aftershave is gray, but still. The knife and the cigar, I think they are the greatest sources of variety. And what else for unity / variety? The patterns. I mentioned the patterns, right? So the use of lines are also a source of, also contribute to the principle of unity here. Not only the color of the suit, but also the patterns in it. So there's continuity and repetition on lines and straight lines with this. All of them have a very similar thickness. So on and so forth. Yeah. By the way, the principle if you wanna understand a little bit better the principles of art are basically how the elements were used. Is a way to understand them. So that's why I'm explicitly mentioning the color, the lines, which are elements of art, right? The shapes and forms. I think it makes it a bit easier to understand. So anyway, okay, so those are sources of unity and variety. Also, if we're gonna talk about that, I guess the features of the face are sources of variety, I suppose. Even though there are 2 eyes and 2 ears, which is some unity, no repetition, but I guess they have unique forms, maybe textures. So anyway, all that said, does any of that contribute to the idea of the spy class 1442? Again, if we take into account that logic of repetition of the bent joints, which is, you know, part of human morphology, if this was a different sort of being, because we have an arm and a forearm, because that's a thing that people have, right? If there was an alien without a forearm, for example, if there was no joint here, is this okay? If there was no joint here, then it will be some sort of alien, you know. Then I think it will detect some TF2 games design, but how should I say? Yeah. So, but this is not the case. In this case, there are joints. That's natural for human beings. So I see that repetition here on the Unity helping a bit with that side of the Team Fortress 2 game design and stuff. Again, doesn't really talk about the spy class, right? But yeah. Okay, fair enough. Now it's easy, right? Variety. I mentioned the knife and the cigar. The cigar not so much, but the knife being a source of variety is naturally, intrinsically tied to the game's mechanics of the backstab, which is something that can only be done with the knife for the spy class. Whenever you are behind someone. So that's tied to the game's mechanics, and so there being variety there, I think it's contributing. I think the right way to understand it is like, what if the spy had a bunch of knives everywhere, you know? Then the variety wouldn't be helping. Of course, then maybe the unity would be tied to that. But anyway, yeah. That's why unity/variety is so easy to help with the creative vision, because if it's not something that adds unity, then possibly something that adds variety. If it's not due to unity, then it's possibly due to variety, you know. It's very easy for unity/variety to help. But anyway, let's move on. What about the other ideas of the creative vision? What about what was the other one? A concealed character and all that stuff. Well, again I mentioned visual properties of the suit, which covers most of the spy's body. But in this case I could also mention the repetition of the color of black for the shoes and hands, which cover the hands and the feet of the spy. I see this as a lesser source of unity. As I mentioned, the color, the patterns are stronger parts, are stronger unities to me, let's say. But there is like this weaker one, and so weaker as I see it, and I think that also is tied to this idea of a character which is concealed, covered, and stuff like that. So let's move on. What about the idea of a gentleman, something that lives in a city in the modern world, civilized folk. I don't like that word because of historical reasons of how it was used, but anyway, I guess we can not think about that. What was I going to say? Okay, so is Unity helping? Again, the patterns of the suit, in this case the color not that much I think, but the pattern itself, much like what I said for movement. And I remember as I said before that different principles of art often influence each other, so yeah, so here this pattern thing is both tied to the principle of movement and unity here. So yeah, so this sort of pattern I think it's pretty common for certain styles of suits. So, which are very specific, designed for clothing of more. I don't know when suits were invented, but I think they are tied to the urban environment and stuff, as I see it at least, humbly. Anyway, to me, I think it helps convey something of sophistication, gentleman, stuff like that. Case in point, this is entirely cultural, but in this case, I think it's working alongside that for our culture, I suppose. Okay, moving on. What about the idea of a character with personality and stuff like that? Oh, again, he's choosing to wear a suit. The pattern here of the suit that I see by the principle of unity is tied to that, you know. Of that again. What else? Now the next principle of movement is the principle of and there's no order, sorry, but you can go through whatever order, but I'm gonna talk about the principle of contrast. So for contrast here, I think the strongest sources I see are basically in contrast with the hands and the suit. Hands and I guess the shoes. There's contrast in color, the black and the red, but also in the forms and shapes because of the fingers and the foot, and which are more smaller, tube-like shapes and forms, I guess. Tube-like forms it would be. Comparing that to the thicker forms of the arm and legs, so there's contrast there. And what else? And I guess the texture also, I just realized, because there are the folds on the clothes, but there are no folds or any sort of texture like that on the gloves, so I think that's how I see the contrast being built here through those elements of art. And I also see some in contrast of the suit, of the white here, in contrast with the red. There is also lines, I guess, because there is a line pattern of the suit in contrast with the white of the inner part of the suit, and stuff like that. So color, lines, a bit of the shapes, I guess. Forms, not that much, but I guess there's a bit of the shapes, like this triangular-ish shapes of this part of the suit, in contrast with the other part of the tie. It's not, I'm not sure if shapes are the most contrasting ones here, if the shapes are the most contrasting, but I think they're helping. So color, shapes, lines, mostly that, I think. Yeah. Also, I would like to mention stuff like, you might think stuff like, oh, but isn't light and darkness, how about contrast? And I agree. I do believe I see contrast here between light and darkness, shadows and brightness. I just don't see it as the strongest source of contrast, but there is also there, admittedly. And so yeah, so any of that ties to the idea of the spy class for Team Fortress 2. Am I gonna say this stuff again? Okay, if I see like a point of interest, let's say on the fingers, and the hands and the feet, especially on the gloves and the hands, right? That's humanoid morphology, so again, all of that is basically heavily on the back that I believe of this idea that human characters are part of Team Fortress 2 game's design philosophy, right? If Team Fortress 3 is ever released and a character is a horse or something, then all of that goes downhill, but whatever, until then, I believe the argument still stands. Yeah, so especially on the fingers again, because the foot a bit follows the forms of the feet, right? But especially on the, but we don't see the fingers of the foot, but on the hand, of the gloves on the hand, it's, I think, a stronger communication, a stronger part communicating human morphology and stuff like that. Anyway, this contrast on the suit and the light and shadows, I don't see it as helping with that idea in general. Maybe a bit on the design of the suit, but I don't know, whatever. Because suits were designed for humans, but whatever. What about the idea of a covert character, hidden character that does not show much or tell much of itself visually? Well, that's kind of misleading, but that does not show too much of himself, let's say. Easy, right? Because if we're focusing on the gloves, then that's literally like a thing that's the cover there, that's the covering part, material, accessory. The shoes also, I guess. But yeah, to focus, and if I'm gonna mention it, this part of the suit, since it's just a part of it, I don't see it as helping, but the gloves are doing the job here, and the shoes, I guess. Because it is helping cover, even though this, as I said before, the suit, I believe it's what covers most of the spy's body, the gloves are helping also, so you know. What else? What about the idea of a gentleman, someone sophisticated, stuff like that? In this case, I don't think the gloves are helping. I don't see that as conveying that specifically. Maybe if it was... it would depend on the context. Depending on the context, I think that could be it, but in this case, not intrinsically, I would say. The shoes a bit, although I don't think you need to be sophisticated to wear shoes, but still. But I guess the middle part of the suit, I think, is strong on that front, let's say, because this is a pretty typical design for suits, you know, this part here, which I think helps convey a bit of ideas of sophistication, culture, and what's the other word? And gentleman ideas. Again, in our culture, as I record this, because this could change a lot, but in our culture, in at least in my culture, as I record it, that's how I see this being conveyed. That's how I see it. And finally, what about the idea of a character with personality and stuff? Again, okay. This time is a bit cool because I'm going to say again the idea of the suit. He's wearing a suit, so you know that showcases a bit of the spy's personality. But I guess also the fact that he wears gloves also help a bit. Because it's something unique, you know. And again, it's a choice of clothing. Pretty easy for that to be a source of a way to convey personality and personal choices, right? So, you know, I think that's also helping, interestingly. And also tie a bit to other stuff that we said, right? The idea of a covert character. So I guess those two ideas of the visual interpreted kind of tie with each other. But that's fine, I think. I think they're still different enough to not be redundant. And so, okay, that was it for contrast. Let's now talk about the principle of emphasis. Emphasis, or you can think hierarchy, it's about visual emphasis, visual hierarchy. It's about there being some sort of focal point that keeps our eyes there. If you're thinking about hierarchy, there could be different ones. There could be a stronger one, then a weaker one. That's the idea. It's emphasis or hierarchy. And for emphasis here, I think specifically on the tie, I see emphasis there. What else? That's probably it. With the help of the contrast, again, the principles of art help each other. With the contrast between the red suit and the white part of the suit, sorry, the red tie and the white part of the suit. All of that, I think that helps to bring emphasis to the tie, which I find interesting because on many other critiques of the other characters, I had seen emphasis on the weapons they were carrying, but in this time, because of the knife with its smaller shapes and forms, and the color also does not add too much variety. In this case, I don't see the weapon being where the emphasis is. Instead, I see it on the time. Very interesting. So, would I call a secondary emphasis somewhere? Maybe on the face, if there would be, because of the amount of details there. But that kind of makes it a bit visually polluted, slightly to me. The tie, by far, it's the strongest emphasis to me. So, I was just checking something. So, that said, is the tie tied? Is the tie connected in one way or another? Helps one way or another the idea of the spy class 14 focus shoe? In this case, probably not. Like, we would have to make kind of a longer route, mental route, go through a whole train of thought that ties are parts of suits that were designed for humans, and humans were, again, apparently a part of Team Fortress 2 game's design. But I don't think we should do that, think like that, because if we follow those kind of logics, then everything's connected to everything. You know? So I think it's a bit too far. The ideas are a bit too far off. So I don't think the emphasis is helping with that idea of humanoid characters for Team Fortress 2 games design. And if it's not helping with that, I don't see it helping with anything else really, because I don't think, as far as I remember, it's not tied to any mechanic. For example, the headshot mechanic, I think, if it's, I hope you can't headshot by shooting at the tie. It's not a tie shot, it's a headshot, the mechanic, you know, and stuff like that. Also, I don't know. Also, nothing for the spy class. Also, so I believe, finally, let's say, okay. Anyway, I believe the tie. The principle of emphasis here is not contributing to that part of the creative vision, but that's fine. So let's move on. What about the idea of a character which is covered, hidden, concealed, and does not show much about itself? Which, now that I think about it, it's kind of paradoxical with the idea of a character with personality, right? But maybe not. Maybe there are ways to do it, right? At least I guess that's the conclusion we're getting at here. So anyway, so for the idea of a closed, of a covered, hidden character, covered one, the tie I don't see as helping. So, you know. This is a moment where we ought to ask ourselves, well, what about the idea of the mask? Isn't that, as I said, a second source of emphasis? Sorry, the face, not the mask. Because it's so close to the mask. And if we're gonna... about that. Not sure we should. Not sure that's a valid point. Because the source of emphasis to me is specifically on the exposed parts of the mask. On the eyes, on the mouth. Although, to be fair, there are some... the protuberances of the ears, I think, are also helping. And the nose, I guess. So, kind of a tough call here. maybe. I'll consider it. Specific, especially because it's the principle of emphasis. Because since it's keep our, at least my eyes on a specific point. At least if you ignore the time, because it's that, to me at least, that's the strongest source of emphasis. But if you think about hierarchy and there being a second focal point of interest, being so close to the mask, which is a concealing element, I think it's contributing to that part of the creative vision that I interpreted. That's what I'm gonna be saying for this critique at the very least. Once again, different art critics on different art critiques could disagree, and that's a part of it. That's okay. So yeah, and what about the other parts, other ideas of the creative vision? What about the idea of a gentleman, sophisticated, stuff like that? Well, the time. In this case, you don't need to, I talked a lot about the suit, right? And you don't need to wear a tie with a suit, but I think that's common. It's a common combo of clothing. And either way, even if that wasn't the case, the tie itself, I believe, it's conveys a little bit of the modern. Not sure if I even should say modern, but anyway, of the post-industrial society. Maybe we could tie to that. I don't know if that's when suits were invented. But in any case, I think it conveys some ideas of sophistication and gentlemanness, and especially like culture, basically, which I think it's all very close to each other. So that's why I'm considering it helping the creative vision here. And finally, what about the idea of personality? Again, you already know what I'm going to say. The tie being a choice of clothing, I think it helps if it evidentiates choices of the character in their clothing, you know. Unlike, for example, a birthmark. I don't think a birthmark helps convey personality, but necessarily. But I guess it helps convey like identity. But anyway, I did choose to talk about personality, not identity. Okay, whatever. Let's just move on. Before things get too confusing, I'm just gonna say that at least to me, I think the tie is contributing to conveying personality for this part. Not just the suit and the tie. Okay, that was it for the principle of emphasis. Now there's only two left. Let's talk about the principle of balance. Balance is all about the appearances of some sort of equilibrium or tension in the artwork, or lack of it. You know, if there is equilibrium and no tension, then it's balanced. If the thing is like pending in some sort of apparent visual disequilibrium, or if it looks tension about to break, those are ways that then it's not, that's how the principle of balance works, basically. So, do I see it here somewhere? It's mostly, the art here is mostly balanced. It's mostly like just a dude standing up, right? And so it doesn't look like he's gonna fall or something like that. He's gonna break something or something. But I do see some slight tension on the joints because they are bent, you know. So, and for the spine to stay in this position, I see some tension, some slight tension being conveyed visually, and that's where I see the principle of balance here on the joints. And so there is some very slight imbalance there, and the rest is basically mostly balanced for the art here. Does any of that tie to the idea of spy class, of the spy class 1442? Well, joints. What do you know? Joints, human morphology. Once again, we are laying heavily on that game design idea here for Valve. So if that's and as long as that argument stands, if I don't find a counter example, not a counter example, a counter argument, if you don't find a counter argument, I believe we have a solid logic here. So yeah, that the tension. Let's articulate it a little bit better, shall we? So, the presence of tension on the joints I see as helping convey typical traits of the morphology of humans, and that being the presence and exclusivity of human characters on Team Fortress 2's characters, of that I see as helping the creative vision be achieved on that part, right? Of the character for the game Team Fortress 2. So, not the spy specifically this time, but you know. Okay, what about the idea of a hidden, concealed individual, stuff like that? Don't see it as helping. I mean, don't get me wrong, the joints are parts of the suit, are on the suit, and as I said before, the suit's covering most of the spy's body, but we're not focusing on the suit, we're focusing on the joints, so I don't think it's fair to, again, that idea of, let's not make like chains of thought, right? Let's try to simplify here. If we're looking just at the joints, I don't see that conveying something hidden, stuff like that. I don't know. Okay, in any way, shape or form. Okay. Let's now talk about what about the other one of the other parts of the vision. Some sort of gentleman, sophisticated character, stuff like that. Again, I don't think tension joints have anything to do with that. As far as communication goes, the important part is if the idea is being conveyed, communicated in some way. Naturally, depends a bit on the interpretation of the viewer, but in this case, I don't think it's an easy interpretation, let's say. So I'll say that it's not helping for that part of the creative vision. This might sound weird because what does joint have to do with gentlemen and stuff, but I was going on my head on a whole tangent of, what about, I don't know, gentlemen who hunt foxes on the wood or something. They use their arms, right? But yeah, ignore that. See how senseless that gets. So yeah, be careful not to go crazy when doing art critiques, my fellow humans that are part of the game design of humanity, I guess, let's say. Anyway, what about the idea, and finally, right? The idea of a character with personality and stuff. Again, the joints, no. Don't see anything that conveys that there. Perhaps if this was the scout, which is all about like running around, so I think that helps a bit. If our attention was on the scout's limbs, I believe that would help convey the personality of the scout and iconic traits of him. But for the spy, I don't see the tension limbs helping with that. Yeah, no. It's just visually, it's just there. So, you know, yeah. So that was it for the principle of balance. And finally, the last principle for me to talk about is the principle of proportion, which is about the sizes of different parts of the artwork, different things in the art and stuff like that. And how does their different or same sizes help in some way or another, right? So let's look at the sizes of things here on this artwork. I'm probably what I usually do is I try to categorize things like putting different scales, you know, from biggest to smallest or vice versa. On the biggest scale here, I would probably think on the torso of the spy. I think that's the biggest part here. After that, I guess the limbs, especially not all limbs. Well, I don't know if the head counts as a limb, but basically the arms and the legs I would place on a smaller scale of size than the torso. After that, I guess I would roughly place in the same scale the head, the hands, and the feet. You know, naturally, technically, we could have like, if we want to be really rigorous, we could have many scales. But I'm trying to broad stroke things here to make it simpler. So on this scale now, I would add in the head of the spy, the gloves, and the boots. What else? After that, I would bundle like details like the eyes, the mouth, the ears. I guess I would also consider the tie roughly on this scale. Also the cigarette and the knife. So there are the smaller things. The knife. I wonder if I should add the knife and the tie to the scale of the head, hands, and shoes. They're not that far off. I don't know. But the cigarette, the eyes, the mouth, the ears, that's definitely on the smallest scale here. But I don't know. Sure. Let's. Okay. So I'm gonna add the knife and the tie to the similar scales, to the same scale as the head, the hands, and the feet. So just to recap, then we have broad stroking things. My scales will be biggest for the torso of the spy. After that, a scale for the arms and the legs. After that, a scale for the head, hands, shoes, knife and tie. And after that, a scale for the cigarette and the eyes, mouth, ear, and stuff. And here another example where you can see different principles of art influence each other, because on the smallest scale we have basically the face, which was one of the focal points of the emphasis, right? And so perhaps the bundle of many small things there is what helped convey the emphasis, what helps bring emphasis there, you know. Hierarchy there. Food for thought. But anyway, yeah. So okay. So anyway, that's our scale. Those are our scales. Does any of that tell us something? This idea of like, okay, we have torso, we have arms and legs, we have hands, feet, head, knife, tie, and after that, eyes, mouth, cigarette. Okay, so does any of that tell us something? Well, it depends. But important is, does any of that tell us something when it comes to making the spy class 1442? And when it comes to the proportion, I think not. You know, it sounds weird in the first place, right? But I'm gonna make things a little bit easier to understand here. The idea here, for example, if the knife had a scale with just the knife, I think that would help contribute to the idea of conveying the spy class, because it would be a unique size, and I think that helps communicate something a bit better, you know. So that's the idea. In our case, the torso has a scale of its own, but that's like I don't see that tying to anything, right? To the idea of making the spy class 1442. Oh, but what about the idea of a humanoid morphology and stuff? Well, the torso is a part of it, but you know. But I kinda, that's why it doesn't make sense, right? Because it's all spread out. So the torso is one scale, the arms and legs is on another one, the hand and feet are on another, and the head and another one. So like, since it's all spread around proportion-wise, I also don't see that helping communicate. Okay. That doesn't help in one way, but it is true that their comparative proportions matter. I just realized now. I was kind of missing on that part. So all that to say is that it's not just about having a unique scale, but is the torso and the legs and the feet, does all of that respect the proportions for a humanoid morphology? And okay, now we can say yes, I guess. Right? In other words, is this a character with unrealistic proportions? That's the important part. Which is okay for art, but it's just that it makes it harder to communicate humanity, you know? Depends a lot actually, but in any case. But I think their proportions in relation to themselves all fit with human morphology. The torso being bigger than the arms being bigger than the hands, and the hands being bigger than the tails of the face, you know, eyes, nose, mouth. So I think those relative proportions between themselves are also helping convey humanity and stuff like that. Which again, one more time, I'm considering to be an important game design philosophy choice, I don't know, for the game Team Fortress 2. Human characters, unless Pyro is an alien. Humanoid characters in any case. Okay, cool. With all that said, what about the idea of a hidden concealed character? Is the proportions helping with any of that? In this case, I think not. It would help, for example, if the gloves and the feet and the shoes had a proportion of its own, but since I decided to make them share it with the knife and the tie, though the tie and the knife I don't see as concealing elements. The tie a little bit, you know, but wouldn't be the most concealing thing in the world, and the knife just does not help. So since there are like different things going on there, I don't think the proportions are helping communicate that idea. And for the rest, it's all over the place, right? So yeah, I was talking about the suit previously. This time I kinda separated the suit, but unlike for trying to think of human physiology, human bodies and proportions, I don't think that helps for the suit when it comes to make something hidden or concealed. So, you know, I just think the proportions are not helping with that part of the creative visual. So yeah. What about to be a sophisticated gentleman? Is the proportions helping with any of that? In this case, yeah, again, similar thing. The closest to it would be like the tie on the scale with the shoes. The tie and shoes kinda, I think tie a bit, but then tying it to the gloves and the knife, it's not like the gloves and knife are what? I don't know, something. I was thinking, what's the opposite of a gentleman? I don't know if there is, whatever. So, yeah, but the important part is I don't think gloves and knives, especially, but at least on this artwork, I don't think they're helping convey notions of sophistication and something like a gentleman. So, and since they're kind of sharing the scale with the tie and the shoes, so again, things are muddled up there. And I don't see it's helping with that part of the creative vision. And that's like the closest I think it could do to help, because, you know, the torso having a proportion of its own, biggest proportion. Okay, cool, right? Does that make any sense for the ideas of a gentleman? No, it's whatever. Let's move on, this is getting weird. Yeah, okay. So, okay. And finally, So, just to recap, the proportions I don't see as helping with the idea of a gentleman with sophistication for the creative vision. And finally, what about the idea of something that conveys personality and the personality of the spy? Torso, legs, and arms, gloves, knife, shoes, tie, and details on the hand. Okay. Maybe again the scale with the tie, gloves, shoes, and knife. Because I think the tie, the gloves, the shoes, all of that are choices of clothing. You know, how the spy chooses to present himself and express himself in the world. Let's say. The only thing that I'm kinda wondering about here is the knife. Is the knife something that expresses his personality? I would say so, on the basis of like being his weapon of choice, let's say. Tying a bit to the game design, I guess, but I think it's fine in this case. No, I don't know. Let's see. Okay, I don't know if the game design is valid to think about the game design here, but I will say this knife is not. I just remember the name of this knife. It's a butterfly knife, right? If I'm thinking right. Google, save me. Oh, oops. I don't have internet for some reason. I'm glad that I don't need internet to record something. Although I wonder when did I lose my internet, because maybe I lost some videos on the stream, but whatever. Okay, I just checked, and yeah. Okay, so this is a butterfly knife, as they call it. Okay, so this is a unique knife. I think it helps a bit convey the personality of the spy, because he chose this. Apparently, it was a knife that was chosen. It's a knife with unique uses, I would say. And I think that communicates a bit of spy's personality. I don't know. On this one, maybe I have a flawed logic somewhere. I would hope a fellow critic would point it out to me. But whatever. That's what I'm gonna be considering for my critique today, for this critique here, that the knife is also contributing. And so the proportions of the gloves, feet, knife and tie, all of that having a scale of its own, I think helps convey a little bit the personality of the spy. Because it's something notable, basically. Being a whole set of things with similar sizes, all of them communicating something similar together. That's my logic here, at least. I see that as helping with that part of the creative vision, of conveying the spy's personality. So that was it for the principles of art. And so finally I can pass judgment. And wow, a lot of stuff helped, right? Yeah, that's what you get when you hire a company with good designers and that are experienced and are professionals at their jobs. You get a lot of different principles helping convey the creative vision. And so it's only natural for me to call this, after everything, a successful work of art, right? Like so many of this stuff. I think perhaps the most unreliable, the most problematic, let's say perhaps, part of the critique here was the whole idea of humanoids being part of Team Fortress 2 games design. Because I'm kind of inferring that, right? I don't know how. I mean, it has its logic, but I don't know. But even if that is something that was not important for the creative vision of Valve. Even if on Team Fortress 3 they add a horse to the cast or something, there was still the variety of the knife on the principle of unity/variety, which is intrinsically tied to the game mechanics of the spy class. So yeah. And since all parts of the creative vision were accounted for, let's say, then my judgment is successful. That's how it works here. That's how I do the art critiques. So that was it. Thank you for tuning in today. Hope the stream was enjoyable. Hope the critique was enjoyable. Join me next time, same place.